Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, please subscribe. I'd really love that. If you're returning, how you doing? Um, Quite a few of you have asked me if what people are seeing up north primarily with these drones and stuff is Project Bluebeam. So I did some digging, okay? And I researched what this blue beam is, okay? And have you ever heard of a man named William Cooper? I found some documents that he has, okay, and that he refers to in this video that I'm going to be showing you, okay? And he goes into government documents that outlines the plan to stage a fake alien invasion. And make no mistake about it, this ties into everything that you already know and stuff like that, okay? So this should come as no surprise to you. But is this what we are seeing? I don't know. I mean, it could be. I question it. I really do. But watch what he has to say, okay? And like I said, I have the document that he was talking about. And I'm going to read a little bit of the document to you, all right? And then I'm going to leave the document link in the description box below for you as well, okay? Here you go.
Years ago, many years ago, in fact, 1972, I was sitting at my desk at about 4:30 in the morning at the headquarters of the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Pacific Fleet, arranging the information that had come in over the last 24 hours into a logical order so that we could prepare a briefing for the Admiral and his staff, which would take place later that morning. Among the papers I found on my desk was a document entitled Operation Majority, and it was not the entire paperwork involving this operation, but was merely a synopsis of the operation and projects contained under it. One of these projects was called Project Red Light. The purpose, according to this document, was to back-engineer captured extraterrestrial technology for adaptation into the United States space program. Now, I have since come to believe that the extraterrestrial portion of all of this is nonsense, but that the technology is real. I believe that many of us were shown these documents over the years so that later we would talk about it. I mean, how can you keep the existence of extraterrestrials, if they were real, a secret? And how could anyone keep quiet knowing that they had seen documentation, official government documents labeled top secret, that expressed that these extraterrestrials were real and had visited this earth? I wanted to know just how true all of this was, and I began a program of research to find out if extraterrestrials were real. The first thing I did was collect every bit of documentation that I could find, both from the Freedom of Information Act, from the research of others, from books that had been printed on the subject of UFOs, and of course through my network of friends in the intelligence community. What I discovered was amazing. What I discovered, ladies and gentlemen, is that there has been a plan in existence since about 1917, and probably before that, to create an artificial extraterrestrial threat to this earth in order to create a one-world totalitarian socialist government. One of the first documents that I found in my search was this one, the Imperial Japanese Mission 1917, a record of the reception throughout the United States of the special mission headed by Viscount Ishii. And when the Imperial Japanese Mission was in New York City, they had a dinner, and some pretty famous people spoke at this dinner. One of them was John Dewey. John Dewey is the father of our failing, disastrous public education system. Here's what he said. Listen very carefully. John Dewey, professor of philosophy in Columbia University, who was the next speaker, was listened to with great intentness. He said, quote, "Someone remarked that the best way to unite all the nations on this globe would be an attack from some other planet. In the face of such an alien enemy, people would respond with a sense of their unity of interest and purpose." Unquote. Now, bear in mind, folks, that's 1917. One of the next documents that I found, and I found quite a few, but one that's pretty important, is called a Report from Iron Mountain, The Probability and Desirability of Permanent Peace. Now, I encourage you to find this book, wherever you can find it. I don't know where you can get it, but find it. Page 66. Credibility, in fact, lies at the heart of the problem of developing a political substitute for war. This is where the space race proposals, in many ways so well suited as economic substitutes for war, fall short. The most ambitious and unrealistic space project cannot of itself generate a believable external menace. It has been hotly argued that such a menace would offer the last best hope of peace, etc., by uniting mankind against the danger of destruction by creatures from other planets or from outer space. Experiments have been proposed to test the credibility of an out-of-our-world invasion threat. And it continues on another page. Nevertheless, an effective political substitute for war would require alternate enemies, some of which might seem equally far-fetched in the context of the current war system. It may be, for instance, that gross pollution of the environment can eventually replace the possibility of mass destruction by nuclear weapons as the principal substitute for war. Are you beginning to get the message, folks? Poisoning of the air and of the principal sources of food and water supply is already well advanced, and at first glance would seem promising in this respect. It constitutes a threat that can be dealt with only through social organization and political power. But from present indications, it will be a generation to a generation and a half before environmental pollution, however severe, will be sufficiently menacing on a global scale to offer a possible basis for a solution. However unlikely some of the possible alternate enemies we have mentioned may seem, we must emphasize that one must be found of credible quality and magnitude if a transition to peace is ever to come about without social disintegration. It is more probable, in our judgment, that such a threat will have to be invented rather than developed from unknown conditions. Ladies and gentlemen, they have created so many alternate enemies in order to bring about their one-world totalitarian socialist state that we don't know which enemy to believe is real or is false, or whether to just toss them all out on their ears. And I think that that is probably going to be the best solution. Disarmament is no accident. All of these bills in Congress to take away our weapons is no accident. The intentional environmental pollution of our lakes, rivers, streams, oceans, forests, everything is no accident, as you just heard. These things were planned many, many years ago. All the bombardment of the public with movies about flying saucers in the 50s, right after the United Nations Treaty was signed and the UN Participation Act was pushed through Congress, and all of the incidents since that have convinced the majority of the American people that flying saucers are real and extraterrestrials exist, and that flying saucers are from an extraterrestrial origin. This is being promulgated in many ways, by television commercials, in the movies, in the newspapers, by creating incidents either real or imagined. I believe, because of my research, and because of the extensive documentation that I've found and that is in my book, that this whole scenario has been created to give us an artificial alien threat from outer space. During the Reagan administration, he made 6 speeches, specifically talked about a threat from outer space by some other species from some other planet. 6, ladies and gentlemen. Why would the president repeat the same thing 6 times, tagged on to the ends of speeches by him? The speechwriters did not put that in the speech. Ronald Reagan added it himself.
Perhaps we need some outside universal threat. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This was a powerful suggestion to implant into the minds of the people of the world that there really is a threat from some other species, from some other planet to this Earth. Now, you people out there have been ignoring the UFO phenomenon for too long. It has all the earmarks of the most successful, most sophisticated mind control operation in the history of the world, and you are ignoring it. What better way to implement a plan to bring about a one-world government than to create the possibility in the minds of the people of the world that we are being threatened from some other species, from some other planet, and do it in a way that if anybody questions it or challenged it or wants to talk about it publicly, that they are ridiculed.
And the ultimate goal is to make the Earth look very small, to present the people of the world with an external threat to this Earth, a superior race from some other planet, vastly superior to us in intellect, philosophy, and technology, in order to cause the dissolution of nation states, the dissolution of all existing religions, and the formation of the world totalitarian socialist government.
Okay, so what the document says, okay? This is the document that he mentioned in the interview. It is a report containing an in-depth look into the government's plan to stage an AI, alien, whatever threat, okay? Now, the following account of the working of the special study group is taken verbatim from a series of tape-recorded interviews. And they refer to this person as John Doe, okay? And this transcript has been edited to minimize the intrusion of questions and comments, as well as for length. And the sequence has been revised in interest of continuity. So the first question is, how was the group formed? And it says the general idea for this type or kind of study dates back to at least 1961. It started with some of the new people who came in with the Kennedy administration, mostly, I think, with McNamara, Bundy, and Rusk. They were impatient about many things. One of them was that no really serious work had been done about planning for peace, a long-range reason for this, of course, was that the idea of real peace in the world, general disarmament, and so on, was looked on as utopian or even crackpot. This is still true, and it's easy enough to understand when you look at what's going on in the world today. It was reflected in the studies that had been made up to that time. They were not realistic. The idea of a special study, the exact form it would take, was worked out in early 1963. The settlement of the Cuban Missile Affair had something to do with it, but what helped most to get it moving were the big changes in military spending that were being planned. Plants being closed, relocations, and so forth. Most of it wasn't made public until much later. It took a long time to select the people for the group. The calls didn't go out until the summer. Who made this selection? That's something I cannot tell you. I wasn't involved with the preliminary planning. The first I knew of it was when I was called myself, but 3 of the people had been in on it. And what the rest know, we learned from them and what went on earlier. I do know that it started very informally. I don't know what particular government agency approved the project. So the next question was, would you care to make a guess? And he says, all right, I think it was an ad HOC committee at the cabinet level or near it. It had to be, I suppose, they gave an organizational job making arrangements, paying the bills, and so on to someone from the state or or defense of the National Security Council. Only one of us was in touch with Washington. I wasn't the one, but I can tell you that very, very few people knew about us. For instance, there was the Ackley Committee. It was set up after we were. If you read the report, same old tune: economic reconversion, turning sword plants into plowshare factories. I think you'll wonder if even the president knew about our group. The Ackley Committee certainly didn't. Is that possible? Really? I mean that not even the president knew of your commission? Well, I don't think there's anything odd about the government attacking a problem at two different levels, or even about two or three government agencies working at cross purposes. It happens all the time. Perhaps the president did know, and I don't mean to denigrate the Ackley Committee, but it was exactly that narrowness of approach that we were supposed to get away from. You have to remember, you've read the report, that what they wanted from us was a different kind of thinking. It was a matter of approach. Herman Kahn calls is Byzantine. No agonizing over cultural or religious values, no moral posturing. It's the kind of thinking that Rand and the Hudson Institute and IDA, which is Institute for Defensive Analysis, brought into war planning. What they asked us to do, and I think we did it, was to give the same kind of treatment to the hypothetical nuclear war. We may have gone further than they expected, but once you establish the premises and your logic, you can't turn back. Kahn's books, for example, are misunderstood, at least by laymen. They shock people, but you see what's important about them is not his conclusions or his opinions, it's the method. He has done more than anyone else I can think of to get the general public accustomed to the style of modern military thinking. Today, it's possible for a columnist to write about counterforce strategy and minimum deterrence, incredible first strike capability, without having to explain every other word. He can write about war and strategy without getting bogged down in questions or morality. The other big difference about work is breadth. The report speaks for itself. I can't say that we took every relevant aspect of life and society into account, but I don't think we missed anything essential. So the next question is, why was this project given to an outside commission? Why couldn't it have been handled by an appropriate government agency? And the answer was, I think that's obvious, or it should be. The kind of thinking wanted from our group just isn't to be had in a formal government operation. Too many constraints, too many inhibitions. This isn't a new problem. Why else would outfits like Rand and Hudson stay in business? Any assignment that's at all sophisticated is almost always given to an outside group. This is true even in the State Department in the gray operations, those that are supposed to be unofficial but are really as official as can be, also with the CIA for our study. Even the private research centers were too institutional. A lot of thought went into making sure that our thinking would be unrestricted, all kinds of little things. The way we were called into the group, the places we met, all kinds of subtle devices to remind us. For instance, even our name, the Special Study Group, you know the government names. Wouldn't you think we would have been called Operation Olive Branch or Project Pacifica or something like that? Nothing like that for us. Too elusive, too suggestive, and no minutes of our meetings too inhibiting about who might be reading them. Of course, we took notes for our own use, and among ourselves, we usually called ourselves the Iron Mountain Boys or Our Thing or whatever came to mind. So, like I said, the link for the rest of that document will be in the description box below. So I'm sure you're also aware of something called Operation Paperclip, okay, where a scientist by the name of Werner, W-E-R-N-H-E-R, von Braun's, former assistant Carol Rosen, R-O-S-I-N, says that von Braun explained to her their final play, and the last card that they will play will be the alien card, and it's all a big fat lie.
The strategy that Werner von Braun taught me was that first the Russians are going to be considered to be the enemy. In fact, when I met him in '74, they were the enemy, the identified enemy. We were told that they had killer satellites. We were told that they were coming to get us and control us, the dirty commies, that whole story. First, the Russians were the enemy against whom we're going to build space-based weapons. Then terrorists would be identified, and that was soon to follow. We heard a lot about terrorism. Then we were going to identify third world country crazies. We now call them nations of concern. But he said that would be the third enemy against whom we would be needing to build space-based weapons. And the next enemy was asteroids. Now at this point, he kind of chuckled the first time he said it. Asteroids, against asteroids we're going to build space-based weapons. So it was funny then. And the funniest one of all was against what he called aliens, extraterrestrials. That would be the final card. And over and over and over, during the 4 years that I knew him and was giving his speeches for him, he would bring up that last card. And remember, Carol, the last card is the alien card. We're going to have to build space-based weapons against aliens. And all of it, he said, is a lie. He didn't mention a timeline, but he said that it was going to be speeding up faster than anybody could possibly imagine. That the effort to put weapons in space was not only based on a lie, but would accelerate past the point of people even understanding it until it was already up there and too late.
So I will leave you with this, okay? They will use, and this right here is going to piss everybody off, okay? They are going to use Project Blue Beam to fake the second coming of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So for those of us who are literally, okay, waiting for such a thing, you know, because we pray to him every day and every night, and we read our Bibles and stuff like that, and we say, please, you know, how, if you ever were to see something like that and you're like, oh my God, do not think that it's actually him. It is what they want you to think and see and believe. Remember the saying, believe half of what you see and a quarter of what you hear, and whatever, however that goes. Okay. This. Ciao.
I can't believe what this former FBI agent just revealed.
What I'm here to tell people is that when Project Blue Beam is used, again, it's not going to be by the United States. It's not going to be by national. It's going to be by global government. They're the ones who are going to use this stuff. And it's going to be not just a bunch of pretty holograms. They're going to be using it for religious figures. They're going to have Jesus in the sky, but it's not just going to be holograms. There's going to be voice-to-skull technology. It's also going to be used. They're going to be able to have these figures speak to every human being on the planet. Imagine the impact of that they're going to be able to see the figure and also hear the figure talking to them. You know, it's amazing. I think that is the particular reason why Jesus said in the Bible, my sheep hear my voice and they will recognize my voice. And I think that was an anticipation of when this operation goes forward. And it's going to go forward in conjunction also with the great fake alien invasion. It's going to go forward with that. And who knows, it's going to be also a sweetener. It's going to be, instead of, we're going to have, maybe 10 or 20 UAPs that have incredible destructive capacity against our cities.